So, hello and welcome to everyone. It's great to see you all. There are familiar and unfamiliar faces here, so it's nice to meet you. My name is Deborah Sheil. I'm with the Division of Learning and Teaching. The quick talks are focused specifically on practice, and today we have the three presentations covering a range of topics, from authentic assessment practice through to the serious pursuit of leisure and planning for engaging learning environments. We are going to collect feedback as we go, and shortly I will pop the feedback link into the chat. You can make a start on filling it in and then finalise it just before you leave this afternoon. So I know you're keen to go, so a very big welcome to both you and Yaoi here to start us off on reflecting on authentic assessment practice in accounting subjects.
Sure. Thank you. I'll just share again. And can you see my PowerPoint up on the screen?
No, we can still
see the program, not the PowerPoint.
You might have to just get out of, if you close your previous screen share.
Okay, what about now?
No, we're still viewing your schedule.
Hang on. Oh, okay. Hang on. There we go. Now it should work. Is that better?
Unfortunately not, but I'm sure we'll be closer. It's still your schedule.
All right. Okay. Share screen.
Yes.
Okay, because you're only allowing documents to be shared. Okay, here we go. Okay, that should be it now.
Beautiful.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. So I'm just to introduce ourselves. My name is Emmett Berry, and I'm here today with Dr. Huang. Hopefully I pronounced that right, Huang?
Yes.
Yue. And we're going to talk about reflecting on an authentic assessment that we put into an accounting subject that we teach together this year. So the structure for our presentation, which sort of fits into the, for those full-time staff members that have to do the EDRS, fits into that sort of those boxes. So we're going to talk about what, so what, and now what with what we did this year with our new assessment that we introduced. And we can discuss at the end. So firstly, this accounting subject that we both teach, it's a third year subject that's taught as part of a Bachelor of Business course that we have a 20-year relationship with 4 universities in China as part of the joint cooperative program. And what it allows for students in China to obtain their specialization degree, as well as a CSU Bachelor of Business at their respective campus. So I might just show you visually where this is, and I'll just do share screen of the maps. So if I've done this right, you should be able to see my screen now. Is that correct? Yeah, sorry, you can see the map of China?
We can, thank you. Beautiful.
Okay. All right, so if we look here, we've got Kunming, where one of our campuses are, Yangzhou, Tianjin, which is near Beijing there, and then up north where Yue is located, we've got Changchun.
Yes, that's right.
Yep. It's probably the coldest of the campuses. Is it snowing yet?
Not today.
Not today. Okay. So that's where the campuses are situated. And moving my share screen back to the PowerPoint now.
Yes.
So how the structure of this Bachelor of Business through CSU works, the first and second year subjects are taught by like on campus, and then by lecturers such as UA, and then the final 8 are taught by, like, we will travel over there under normal circumstances, but for the past couple of years we've needed to use Zoom that we're using right now. So look, there's some the general challenges that we have when teaching in the program is when we go over there, we're not there for the whole semester, so there's sort of intensive teaching, and we've got to deal with not one but 2 regulatory agencies. So we've got the Ministry of Education in China and TESCO here, and English obviously is a second language, and differences in the previous education as to what's been the focus and whatnot. So just to give you some sort of background as the sort of challenges that we have in teaching the course. So with regards to our respective responsibilities in teaching, so my role is to prepare the subject outline, the assessment tasks, the materials, and I conduct the moderation, and I also teach for 4 of the weeks. Our sessions go for 9 weeks, and UA will teach the students outside of those 4 weeks. So UA's responsibility is being that face-to-face contact outside of those teaching weeks, and he has also the responsibility of marking all the assessments, and this assessment that we're going to talk about today. So with the advent of COVID and not being able to go over to be on site, we didn't even know that if Zoom would work. So it was quite an interesting experience at the start of last year. We didn't know how we were going to go about keeping everything moving, but look, we managed to get over that hurdle, and we found out Zoom worked quite well, because sometimes there's firewall issues and just like generally slow internet. So with all that going on, we introduced a new assessment task. Now, I haven't copied and pasted the whole assessment task into this PowerPoint, but to give you an idea of what we introduced, we tried to make an authentic assessment in that it wasn't just, here's a concept, go to the textbook and write about it and pick a few examples to discuss further. We had the students actually be involved in a scenario where they worked for X, it was a fictitious firm, but what we asked them to do is to go to, and there's an actual website called annualreports.com, and every publicly listed company needs to provide an annual report on their finances. Anyway, this website's like a repository that has all different reports from different stock exchanges, and it's really helpful as a centralized tool for investors and whatnot, but for our purposes, it was really handy for the assignment. So we limited students in that we wanted it to be from the utilities industry, and students needed to go to this website, select a company of their choice within the utilities industry, and they had to then specifically talk about accounting changes that have occurred within the financials. So generally, like with a financial statement, there would be the current year, then there would be the previous year, and so there's that comparative information, and there's also a whole bunch of what we call notes, which further explain like accounting policy changes and whatnot. And so what we wanted the students to focus on is key changes that have occurred during the year, and write about that in a report. And that was to help this this fictitious organization in preparing for the upcoming year and with their clients and whatnot, and explaining some of the changes that organizations in industry have done. So we, like, following on from this, like, we gave students a regimented structure to prepare their report in. So, you know, executive summary, tables of contents, introduction, body, and whatnot. Because I probably should mention, UA was responsible for marking the report. We're dealing with about 450 students. So having that structure was really quite helpful. But one of the other things that we introduced was a reflective component where we got students to, this is probably the most new component, we got students to reflect on what they had written afterwards and tell us how, like, self-mark themselves actually, and say how they aligned with the marking criteria, which we haven't done before. And just a reflective writing component was quite novel in what we've done in the accounting subjects anyway. So anyway, that was part B of the task. And UA and I, with the literature that we looked up that helps support this, I've labeled the first three and UA with the next three. There is support of this being a useful tool, having this authentic assessments and also a reflective component. But what I was sort of finding a gap in the literature from what I looked at anyway. I think what we're doing is quite new with the whole ESOL and accounting, like English of a second language and accounting as well. I could find general discussion on, like, this isn't a completely new idea, but this was new to what we're doing and in the current teaching regime that we're offering. UA, I don't know, did you have any comments on your articles as well?
Okay. And you look through paper. The first one, it argues that in order to adapt to the rapid changes in society, high-level thinking abilities and generic attributes gradually become the main focus, not just one, just like that. And the second paper, and it introduced that the basic concept or measure is that the student should learn better, teachers teach better, the school system become, and so the school system will become more efficient. The last paper and analyzed the content of students' evaluation reform, the application, including ideological dimension, standard dimension, method dimension, and mechanism dimension. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So with regards to your views on the outcomes from completing this 450 assessment marking, UA, what did you have to say? Okay,
no problem. And about student outcomes, and in the first part about work authentic assessment, I think it will help Chinese students improve their understanding about what they have done. Just because Chinese students do not have too much chance to access to complete financial reports of Western countries, so I think this is very good method, help them to study it in depth. So authentic assessments will help students understanding related accounting issues. It is very valued, practice for that. And about the second part, self-assessment, I think it is also very effective, just because making themselves and making summary of experience and limitation of difficulties will take them and understand what they are doing, just like, training graduate students who need to read papers and articles and studying what those papers cite and its innovations and limitations. So it is a very excellent method. The last is also my fun. I found, that it is a very interesting thing. Maybe it is a big difference between Chinese and the Western countries. Just because Chinese students, the ability of literature citation is very, is poor. Just because Chinese students started to do it only in the college of universities. From that time, they started to, how to use paper, something just like that. So, in my opinion, we should give them some time to get used to it. Okay, I'm done. Amit.
Yeah, thank you very much, Yue. And looking at some of the outcomes, just quickly because I'm running out of time. Look, the percent positive responses were pretty good, but so look, but they've been good for a few years. So Yue and we must be doing something right. But with what I find from this data most helpful and interesting is the reduction in academic misconduct cases over the years. So firstly, this is regarding the 30% report that we're talking about with this presentation. There's also a 50% exam, but focusing on the report, it's gone down year after year. And I think one of the things we can conclude from this is having that self-reflection component where students are checking their material against the marking criteria, and it's their personal thoughts on how they're meeting the respective section of the marking criteria. That in turn has reduced the ability of finding academic misconduct because they're writing unique material. So, look, that's just, look, what's next? Well, it appeared to be successful doing this reflective component. We'd like to do find out a more targeted survey on either this students or the next year's students on what they thought of this, and perhaps this could be used with another colleague. We can publish an article based on this data. So anyway, that's our presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. It really was a quick talk. It just flew by, didn't it? Thank you for that. Authentic assessment, something I think most of us are just very interested in. So we'll come back and have a look at the slides later. And just a reminder, all of these presentations are available offline once it's finished. But now we're going to cross over to Yazden, who's going to tell us about why we all need a serious leisure pursuit.
Nice. Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. So I just share my screen. If you could please stop sharing yours, then I will be able to do so. Thank you. Right, so share screen, and that's the PowerPoint. And can you see the PowerPoint? Great. Hello everyone, and thank you for attending this presentation. I'm sharing my research journey with you about what I'm doing in the School of Information and Communication Studies at Charlestown University. My research area is human information behavior, and it means all the information activities that we do during our everyday life, or work-related or leisure-related activities. And it includes information seeking, information sharing, browsings, information organizing information, and even avoiding some information is still part of information behavior. And during the past 40 years, most of the studies in my discipline focused on work-related or academic context. And just recently, and by recently I mean since a few years ago, a number of scholars realized that we need to consider a leisure context as well, because leisure context is also very information rich, and we use the information, various kinds of information for our leisure activities, and in particular serious leisure. And serious leisure, if this is a new term for you, it looks like an oxymoron. It looks like an irony, because it's serious but it's leisure, but it's serious. And it means volunteer activities, hobbies, and amateurism, which is something between work and pure casual leisure. So for example, watching TV, walking, or reading book, reading fiction is a casual leisure. But serious leisure is something more than that. So it means something that needs a long-term commitment, passion, and skills and knowledge. So in my research, I'm trying to find out how people engage with various kinds of information as part of the serious leisure, and how do they make sense of information experiences, and to what extent their information experience are joyful and meaningful. Because again, in the literature, there are plenty of papers, massive literature about all the negative aspects of information experiences, like information anxiety, information divide, information poverty, information overload. But again, recently there is an emergent area called the positive side of information, and in particular the joy of information. So there are 6 criteria for serious leisure. Any leisure activity which is actually have these kinds of criteria are serious leisure: perseverance and commitment, a potentiality to turn into a career, a significant personal effort, a durable personal and social benefits that I focus on this part today, and unique ethos within a social world, and personal and social identity. So that's criteria for serious leisure. So these are examples. So coin collecting, stamp collecting, food blogging, volunteer, fundraising, activism, environmental activism, bird watching, gardening, genealogy, and bonsai growing. So far, I have done research about a number of them. I have done research about bird watchers, knitters, and at the moment, I am doing a research about bonsai growers across Australia. And I use qualitative methods like phenomenology and thematic analysis, and I interview people. So what are the benefits of serious leisure? Research in this area shows that there are a wide range of personal and social benefits of serious leisure, such as positive psychological well-being through personal enrichment, self-actualization, self-expression, and also enjoyable distraction. This is one of my favorite terms. It's something that we enjoy doing. It distracts us from our everyday life chores and tasks and activities, but it's meaningful and it's joyful, so and it's valuable. So and also self-determination, optimism, and there are evidence for every single of these benefits, but obviously it was not possible for me to include all the citation here, but there is a reference list at the end of the presentation. You can have a look. What I can summarize based on my research, I found out that people who are engaged in serious leisure, they go through 3 stages: pleasure, passion, and purpose. So it's purely pleasurable at the beginning, then they they become passionate about what they do, and then they eventually find some form of purposes in what they are doing. So, and they are equally important. You know, it doesn't have to be purposeful from the beginning. It doesn't have to be so passionate, but this is a kind of a pattern that I can see in my data. Because even purely pleasurable activities are helpful for our well-being. So by focusing on serious leisure, I'm not underestimating the value of casual leisure. That's also equally important. But the point about serious leisure is because it has commitment and dedication to something, there is a higher possibility of becoming more meaningful and more useful. So I summarized my findings so far, and also the literature review that I have done over the last 4 years, that there are 5 benefits of serious leisure in terms of our well-being. And that's the interdisciplinary parts of my research, because I'm looking at serious leisure from information science perspective, but at the same time, I am trying to find some interdisciplinary links. So serious leisure is very useful in terms of cognitive well-being. Why? Because it's always, there is a form of learning in serious leisure. So as an example, bonsai growing, to be a bonsai grower, you need to learn a lot. You need to learn about plants, you need to learn about all this artistic aspects of bonsai, you need to learn about the tools and devices that they use. So there is always a form of learning. It's also helpful in emotional well-being. Why emotional? Because serious leisure activities, you know, can be done individually or in a group, and you know, there is interaction with other people, and the sense of achievement that we have, because when we are doing something as a passion in a long term, we will have some form of achievement, and then it's very helpful. And then it's in terms of social well-being. So far, I interviewed people from various kinds of serious leisure activities. In my first project that is finished by now, I interviewed people, I used maximum variation sampling, and I interviewed people from a wide range of leisure activities, and all of them said that their leisure is a kind of a starting point for social connectedness, and there is, even for leisure activities which looks might look a bit individual, and you know, you can do it on your own, but there is still a form of social activities. You can join a club, there are like-minded people, you can join a community of interest. Occupational well-being, again, there is research that engaging in leisure activities helps us to learn new skills, particularly because we do it as a form of a joyful activity. We don't have to do it. We do it because we love it, because we decided to do that. It's not a compulsory, mandatory activity. There is a form of authenticity and a form of autonomy and freedom. So that's very helpful. And eventually, one of the best things here is eudynamic well-being. Eudynamic comes from a term initially coined by Aristotle, eudaimonia, which means a meaningful and happy life. So it's more than just happiness, it's meaningfulness as well. So serious leisure is a context to care for other people, and also connection with other people, and you know, find meaning in life. So that's why it's helpful in eudynamic well-being. Again, for next few slides that there are just at the end of my presentation, I am concerned about the time. Serious leisure, as I said, always a form of learning is embedded in the activity, and we are learning something when we are involved in serious leisure. So I'm looking at it from the learning perspective. And also, my research shows that the most joyful information activities in serious leisure is information sharing. Not necessarily because of the significance of the information that we share, because sharing is caring and sharing is a form of connection. So again, people who are involved in serious leisure, they are so keen to share their information with others. They post on Facebook, they post on YouTube, and they keep sharing their information. And finally, serious leisure is again a very productive context for information grounds. And information grounds means a temporary, context that we have a chance to share information with other people. So in different activities, we have a chance to do that. And these are references here. You can have a look if you are interested. And I also publish a number of papers and presentations about my research. Thank you for your attention. And if there is any question or comments, I will be more than happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think that it was so joyful, even your explanation of it, but the linkages between why you do it and the results are just amazing. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Your timing was spot on. I think potentially we'll have a chance for chatting, talking about any of these presentations a little more toward the end, but I think we might go over to you, Claire, now for your quick talk on engaging learning environments.
Thank you. And hopefully today I am not on mute and I am sharing my screen. All right, so my name is Claire Singh and I am a lecturer in medical radiation science and also an academic integrity officer. And just before I delve into this, I'd really like to thank Deborah for all of her mentoring throughout our discussions in the community of practice that Deborah runs, and also to Tani Nelson for believing in my crazy ideas and helping me implement them. And because I'm an academic integrity officer, there's the copyright warning. So what I'm going to talk about is the creation of our connected learning workshops within MRS 204, which is sectional anatomy. So I'm a new academic. I've been at CSU since 2019. So I really just want to sort of delve into how I came about this and how actually studying EEL 516 actually helped me work towards doing this. So I begin with the Driscoll's reflection format here. So I ask what, so what, and now what, which I see is quite a popular reflection tool. And thank you again to Deborah for introducing me to it. So the what. Well, my what, I'm kind of thinking about the problems. And so when I was developing this subject, we were quite free because this was a second session subject, but I just had this inkling of a feeling that the COVID doo-doo would hit the fan, and it certainly did. So I was trying to create a space that would kind of take that into consideration because it should have been a face-to-face class, and I wanted to make sure that if we ended up in lockdown that it transferred over. I was also thinking about student preference. This is a second year subject students should attend, but students often don't attend and actually watch afterwards. Sometimes they don't have any choice. They've got to work to support themselves. Student motivation, I find really interesting because I think we all know that a lot of students attend our sessions so that they can pass the exam, not actually have a lifetime lifelong learning experience, which sectional anatomy, if you're a radiographer, is pretty much an intrinsic part of what we do. And IVT. I hate IVT. I've had so many problems with IVT. As a new academic, it made me nervous working with IVT, so I wanted to ditch it. I watch or listen to a lot of broadcasts and podcasts on the way to Wagga when I'm driving, and I listened to this guy talk, and I came back and I actually watched it, and his video is called Death by PowerPoint, and I highly recommend everybody having a look at that if you get a chance. So my personal motivation were my children. So I have last year I had a first year university student for a child, 20 years old and studying in lockdown from my house. Also have a son who has attention deficit disorder that severely impacted his learning. So I've sort of taken some experience from that as well. My experience as a student, so back in the UK in 1993, when I began my radiography degree, there were books and that was all. I went on to be a clinical educator for more than 20 years. And then obviously the input from EEL 516, which was certainly extremely helpful. Now the so what. So what I started to do, because when I first came to CSU, I sort of thought, well, it's lectures or nothing, like that's how it works. You do a lecture or you do a tutorial and there's no in between and there's no change. That's just how it is because I'm a lecturer, right? I need to lecture. But it didn't suit my teaching style or my learning style. So when I began to study for EEL 516, I started to look more at the theories and actually think about how I could make any changes within the boundaries of what I actually am allowed to do. So just on my personal reflection with this subject, I really wanted it to be hands-on. I wanted students to have learning followed by application. The experience of my son having attention deficit disorder made me quite interested in chunking of information because, I mean, obviously not all my students have ADD, but even for my own learning and cognitive loading theories, we know that people basically listen to the first 15 minutes and then they may actually drift out. So I was pretty interested in expressing to my students about how to learn anatomy, not just trying to transfer my knowledge to them. So I was actually trying to just give them the tools to learn the anatomy as well. So during EEL 516, one of the assessments that I had to do was a review of a subject. And in that review, I sort of started looking at these ideas of how can I make this better? Like, how can I improve what happens now? And how can I make it a good experience for students and not just be that me trying to transfer my knowledge onto them, but actually getting them to acquire that knowledge themselves. So the main theories that I looked at, a big one was the CSU online learning model, which is based on Moore's work, blended learning, communities of inquiry, and a flipped classroom, but none of them quite fitted exactly to what I wanted to create. So being a smarty pants, I went on Canva and actually created my own little framework. So what I have here are all the elements of what I consider are an integral part of how I teach and how I go about it. So I wanted to make sure that it was supportive, that we were available, that the environment was respectful, and really importantly, that it was safe, because I've heard anecdotal stories from students that, you know, they don't want to speak up because they feel like they're an idiot, or they feel like they might be perceived as not knowing stuff, especially in the Zoom setting where they're being recorded. I then very cliche took I've forgotten the word. The CSU, what are they called? Values, yes. But I actually found that it really did fit into the way that I was teaching, and that was insightful, inclusive, impactful, and inspiring. And so within those concepts, I've sort of tried to bring in as well elements of like the flipped classroom and the community learning sort of scenario, because I wanted to use technology. I certainly value students' feedback. It really had to be interactive and it had to be really authentic. And so this is basically what I work to and how I created what I call the connected learning workshops. So just a bit about actually learning anatomy. It's really hard. It's not something that can be rote learned, and students need to actually understand what they're looking at to actually be able to apply it and look at anatomical images. So the plan was as well that when I was setting up the workshop, it would be available synchronously and asynchronously, and also allow students to go back and review work if they wanted. So that's just an example of my workshop page that basically beforehand actually told students what we were going to be doing, but also if students were watching the recordings, they could go through the Interact site and follow what was actually happening in the workshops. I also created a sectional anatomy champions sharing page. And the reason why I did this was based around that concept of teaching students how to learn rather than teaching them what to learn. And so I invited students to share with me their light bulb moments. And these are just a few examples of what came out of that. And students found it really helpful, and so did I. So it gave me a lot of insight into what they found helpful and what they didn't. So I just wanted to give you a brief example of how I actually go about teaching. And so I liken teaching anatomy to a signpost theory. That's my theory. It's not a real theory. So I'm showing you this picture here. Anybody have any clue at all where it might be? I'll take that as a no. But if we start looking for signposts and you recognize those signposts, you can start putting things into context. And so I'm sure you all know now, because our big signposts there is the Opera House and Sydney Harbour Bridge. I'm sure you can figure out where we are now. And so what I do with the students in these workshops is to actually start with the signposts. So anatomy is complex. Transferring 2D concepts to 3D is really difficult. So looking at this scan here, even though I'm a very experienced radiographer, you know, I really couldn't tell you what that little vessel is there, and I wouldn't expect any of my students to know that either. So we started with the signposts first. So this is visible body, which is a technology that's available through the library. And it allows students to explore in a 3D way and digitally dissect the body before they actually get their hands on any medical images. And it's a brilliant resource. It's incredibly well done. It's real time. It gives students information, and they can look through and learn what those signposts are. Then we use a system called the Picture Archive and Communication System, which is a bit of a mouthful, so we call it the PACS. And so we start going through it and showing students where these signposts are. So at the moment, I'm on the aorta, and this is actually a recording from one of my workshops where I'm showing students how to find their signposts, in this case, the aorta. I also added in a lot of my own drawings. The students, I think, laughed at me, as did Tani. We described myself as not the Picasso, and that's one of my drawings there. But even if you don't know anatomy, I think you can sort of hopefully relate what you're seeing here to these structures that you're seeing here. And so this is how I would present in the workshops. I would have a diagram, and then we would work through our PACS together. Again, that's just another example of using visible body and then relating it to actual medical images. So the workshop side of things, I would provide a little bit of tuition. So that lecture style, here's your information. And then we would put students into breakout rooms and have a shared Google Doc. And this is just one of the examples. These are their drawings. And Tani and I would jump in and out of the breakout rooms and just make sure that students were on the right track. We would then go through and afterwards, if students weren't there and still participated, provide them with feedback. A big component of what we were doing was a 1-minute paper. So every time we had a session, students were asked to fill out a 1-minute paper, and we received a phenomenal amount of feedback. That's just scrolling through what we've got there. There's a lot of feedback. The other major thing that we did was actually show the students that we did listen to their feedback and make changes based on their feedback. On to SES. Overall, pretty good. Probably the most important areas highlighted for me was feedback I received throughout this subject helped me learn effectively, and these received the lowest scores. And so I'll talk about that very briefly because I'm nearly out of time afterwards. Our SES surveys, I chucked it into NVivo. This is our positive feedback. So pretty happy with the words that's been pulled out here. Activities, students, helpful, subject, learning, brilliant. This is our negative feedback. And even within that negative feedback, actually the activities came across positively, even in the negative feedback. The students didn't like changes. For example, I had the exam invigilated and that didn't go down too well, but the negative feedback wasn't overly negative. Now what? So it's an iterative process. Feedback is incredibly important to us. One student very constructively said, please start on the chest next time, which makes sense because all the blood vessels come off the chest. Brilliant idea. I think we need to provide a space for students to collaborate if they are watching stuff asynchronously, and we probably need to provide exemplars of activities, not just go through it live with students that are with us. And I'm going to provide a weekly formative assessment so that they can check in and see where they are. So the two main things in the middle are to validate the positive and constructive feedback, and to really normalize that action of giving feedback and know that it's okay to say it and that we're actually going to act on it. I'll just flick through them if anyone wants to look later, but that's some of our actual feedback references, and that's me.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks for sharing that with us, and thanks to all of you for being so on time and interesting, such interesting linkages, your reflective cycle along with how you did it, Amit and Yoa. But we now have wonderfully 10 minutes to open the floor to questions. So any questions on anything, please?
That mean I get an early mark for a coffee?
No, it certainly doesn't. There's my timer going on. Get to it. I'll start with a couple. From the authentic assessment point of view, I think the learnings that you got from the language, English as a second language, and also trying to get that self-reflection against the marking criteria. What were the main challenges you found with that?
Well, I guess I'm sort of speaking for you here, but because he was doing the marking of this, but I guess we found well, it was interesting, not to say it was a challenge, but it was interesting to see some really genuine responses because you know, for me, and maybe this isn't a general thing, but I hadn't had that before with this, with the Chinese students, where they're like speaking from their own personal views. It's always been very objective report writing. You know, we don't say I, we, I thought, and all this kind of stuff. So, and I found when I was doing my moderation component, like there was some really, it was really like nice to see, oh, they're actually taking this in, and you know, they're not just going through the motions, and there's some really nice responses that made me feel warm and fuzzy. So that's what I could say about it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that. We really do. You really can start to hear the student voice, and when you've got large cohorts, I mean, did you say 450?
Yeah, and that one of the 4 campuses is 450. So yes, we probably have like 900 or so in total. Yeah.
Yes, and your teaching period seems quite short. So it sounds like it was 8 weeks, and you share it's the team teaching similar. I think Claire, you and Tani did the team teaching.
Yeah, it sounds similar. Yeah, I taught for a bit, did my thing, and then Yue would do his bit in the classroom face to face with the students, and yeah, then we'd have an exam at the end.
Yes.
So yeah, it was great just to read the sort of, because it's hard sometimes to get feedback, especially in this setting. Like I can't go up to a student and say, hey, can I get your response? I can, you can ask people on Zoom for feedback, and sometimes they just don't answer. Have you found that in your teaching? Because you can sort of say, oh, sorry, I was out for a minute or so. But it's harder to engage a response. But when you see it, they've got time to prepare their response, and the reflection. It's been great to read those authentic responses.
Yeah, thank you for that. And both Sam and Marianne, you've shared in the chat. Sam, you spoke about the similar assessment type for 5 years, that they have mixed opinions but do well. I think that was in response to both Claire and Emmett's presentation.
More on the authentic assessment. So I do authentic and problem-based, which is really, they're all kind of that over time. But so I've done that for about 5 years. And I might touch base, Emmett. I've done some interesting stuff with videos where you can frame for the student with a video initially, set the scene of their position in a firm. But I found good. Yeah.
Sorry, I was keen to find out more. Yeah.
Sure. But the really good students find it great because it links to their future pursuits. Students who aren't really wanting to engage with the subject don't like it as much, but they still all really do well. And I think it's the challenge for me is you're getting the students to go through a process that they need to go through, whether they want to or not is an aside. It's the journey that they need to go through in order to become a professional. And sometimes, that creating that cognitive dissonance with them is an important factor. So it's great to see more of those come out. And I got the idea at a CSU Ed many years ago in, I think it was family estate planning. It was a legal subject that they were doing it in. So definitely has legs.
I can totally agree. Some of our onshore students, like I teach another subject where they have to write a reflection on having done work placement, and you have a variety of views of how students feel about going on work placement. So it's not a silver bullet or anything, but I can understand the mixed feedback that you'd receive in other subjects.
Reflective practice always brings those kinds of things up, I think, for many of us. And just on that, I think, Justin, with the research that you've done, and you've been interviewing your people on that enjoyable distraction, that must require quite a lot of that reflection, the so what. And
yes, it does. Yeah, and interestingly, when I interview people, most of them say at the end that before this interview, we never had such a deep reflection on what we do. So interestingly enough, the process of this research is somehow beneficial for me as a researcher, because I have a chance to talk with different people and reflecting on their experience and what they do, and for themselves as well. So because this is a kind of a deep interview, asking lots of questions and addressing different aspects. So reflection is such a very important element of the whole research here.
And it really does continue the learning in all sorts of ways. It just goes on and on and on.
Exactly.
Like me, really, but someone else. Marianne, I think you had also noted with the authentic assessment, you got a few ideas from from the presentations for what you might take forward?
Yes, absolutely. Not just the not just the authentic, not just the authentic assessment, which is really valuable and we are trained to do, but that reflection and self-marking. What we're looking to do, it's a professional subject, and it's also looking at ways to increase academic integrity in non-punitive ways. So it's all about helping students to facilitate their development in things like, doing citations and understanding when to give acknowledgement for ideas and stuff. And, we've been talking about this for a little while. But that idea about using self-marking as part of that toolbox, so that they're developing that professional judgment about what they do and how they do it and why they do it. I thought that was a really great idea, and one that will certainly, I think, at least look at integrating into what we're talking about. So thanks for that.
Yes, thanks to all of you for your presentation, and also for me, it really does highlight the voice, the listening to the voices. That part of what we do is we hear and we respond to the learning needs, but also the research, the information. I mean, we're in such a privileged position to get this feedback, to get this loop going with people who are prepared to share it. As an assessment, they're still sharing all those hours and hours of work that they've done and put in and participated with us. On that note, I'm not going to string it out for all of you. The presenters are probably all dying for a cup of coffee, but if anyone would like to say a last few words before we head off, that would be very welcome. And I have put another link to the feedback in the chat window.
No, I think that's it. I think
Starting to get off.
we've got the panel discussion now. So
yeah, we do go have a few minutes. Thank you, everybody. We check in, and so interesting to follow up a little bit too, guest, and I'll follow up where you're going with that. Keep an eye on that research. It'd be great, and all of it, of course.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Deborah.
Thanks,
Thanks, Claire.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Elaine. Bye.